They fired her from the military. Evelyn Shaw didn't argue. She didn't beg. She didn't protest the decision etched across the final page of her career. Dismissed. Psychological instability. She simply stood, saluted, and walked away. The desert swallowed her within weeks. The commanders who signed her dismissal never questioned where she went. In their minds, she was a ghost now. Another broken mind, buried beneath classified documents and failed war plans. But Evelyn had not broken. She had calculated, and she had chosen. For 20 years, the world forgot her. She worked alone, not to hide, to build. Out in the endless expanse of the Sonoran Desert, where even satellites saw only dust and wind, Evelyn mapped fault lines, charted water tables, and buried steel deeper than anyone had before. She built not a bunker, but a network. Miles of interconnected tunnels, supply caches, reinforced domes capable of housing thousands. Ventilation shafts disguised as canyon fractures. Entry points hidden beneath centuries of dust. Every bolt welded by her own hands. Every wire placed with precision. She ate rations in silence. She slept beside machinery. She worked until her muscles tore and bones cracked. And when the pain became too much, she reminded herself of the day they fired her. The day they stopped preparing. Someone had to be ready. She knew the collapse was coming, not in dreams, in data. And when it came, her network would be the only shelter left. Above ground, the world laughed. Below, Evelyn waited. The collapse didn't arrive as a scream. It arrived as a whisper. First, satellites fell silent. Then communication grids fractured. Then power grids failed. Cities flickered and died. Highways jammed, supply lines severed. Emergency broadcasts vanished. Evelyn watched it unfold from her command station deep beneath the desert floor. She saw the same patterns that had once filled her dismissed reports. Staggered attacks on critical infrastructure, overlapping disruptions, coordinated sabotage across continental systems. Her calculations had been correct. She watched government feeds vanish one by one. She watched the perimeter seismic monitors detect unregistered movements, masses of displaced populations, flowing like rivers across dead highways. She heard nothing but static from the frequencies where command centers once barked orders. Evelyn didn't panic. She activated Stage 1. Automated drone teams surfaced, scanning for survivors. Entry shafts opened. The bunkers she'd spent 2 decades building alone in silence opened their gates, and people came. At first, dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. They arrived exhausted, bleeding, silent. They didn't know who she was. They didn't ask. They only knew the desert had opened to them. And inside? There was light. Inside the network, people expected cold stone and empty silence. Instead, they found life. Evelyn's bunkers weren't simple shelters. They were autonomous ecosystems. Hydroponic farms glowed beneath LED suns. Air purification towers hummed. Water from deep aquifers cycled through filtration chambers. Medical bays stood stocked. Dormitories stretched into darkness. Survivors wandered through sterile corridors, stunned. Then they saw her, Evelyn Shaw. Short hair, sun-scarred skin, eyes cold as steel. She didn't explain. She didn't reassure. She commanded. You will follow protocol. At first, there was fear, then anger. Some resisted. She didn't argue. She activated quarantine lockdowns, denied them air until they obeyed. She wasn't cruel. She was efficient. People who hated each other slept side by side. Mothers learned oxygen-scrubbing routines. Children were assigned hydroponic stations. Each person became a function in her machine. A system wasn't a democracy. It was survival, and Evelyn knew survival. But even she hadn't calculated everything. Her seismic sensors triggered a new alert. Not natural, not refugees, an army. At first she thought it was a malfunction, movement across the southern perimeter, too structured to be natural, too consistent to be survivors. Recon drones confirmed it. Armed convoys, armored vehicles, repurposed drones. A rogue force, unknown, unregistered, and headed directly toward her network. Evelyn analyzed their formation. They weren't seeking shelter. They were hunting infrastructure. They had detected her. She initiated Stage 2. Outer bunkers were sealed. Internal chambers reconfigured into fallback shelters. Food rations redistributed. Weapon systems activated. Non-lethal first. Survivors questioned nothing. They obeyed. Evelyn watched the monitors, calculating strike points, analyzing fuel consumption of her reactors, mapping breach projections. Her mind worked faster than her body. But her body hadn't slept in 72 hours. She ignored the tremors in her hands. She ignored the blackouts. Her mission was simple: protect the system, protect the survivors, no matter the cost. The rogue army reached the perimeter. She waited. She had built these walls herself. She knew how long they'd hold. Not long enough. The first attack wave came at midnight. Missiles detonated across the desert floor. Evelyn's seismic monitors translated the impacts like heartbeats. Boom, pause. Boom, pause. She watched her outer bunkers absorb the hits. She hadn't designed them to withstand prolonged bombardment. They were sacrifices. Delay tactics. Each second they bought her mattered. Inside, survivors huddled in silence. Children cried without sound. Families waited, eyes wide, oxygen masks clutched to their faces. Evelyn didn't comfort them. She rationed air. She rerouted power to the defense grids. Her fingers moved across control panels slick with sweat. She watched reactor temperatures rise. She calculated the exact moment the cooling systems would fail. She prepared to vent the chambers. If necessary, she'd vent sectors full of civilians. Sacrifice was survival. She had learned that in the war. Above, her walls cracked. Her bunkers fell. One by one. Every alert was a countdown. Every explosion a statistic. Boom, pause, boom, pause, until silence. And then, internal breach alarms. They were inside. Evelyn knew the bunkers were compromised. She didn't retreat. She didn't seal herself away. She advanced through darkened maintenance shafts. She moved like a shadow, but her mind sharper than ever. She knew these tunnels. She'd dug them herself. Her weapons weren't guns. They were airlocks, pressure vents, floodgates. Each corridor became a trap. Each door a weapon. She sealed sections behind advancing enemies, vented oxygen, flooded others with desert dust so thick they suffocated without firing a shot. She watched them die through cameras. No emotion, only calculations. Each minute bought more time. Each body extended survival. She felt no pride. She felt no guilt, only purpose. But time wasn't hers. Her primary air filtration tower took a direct hit. Reactor levels critical. Her bunkers, her machine, her life's work, failing. And yet the survivors still breathed. They followed her protocols. They obeyed. But her system couldn't save them. Her hands trembled as she entered the final sequence. The one command she had written on the day she started building. Core collapse. Core collapse wasn't destruction, it was preservation. Deep beneath the central nexus, Evelyn had constructed one last chamber, a sphere within reinforced earth. No windows, no corridors, no exits. It was her last algorithm. If the network failed, if her system fell, she would seal the survivors inside. It would be dark, it would be cold, but they would live. For as long as resources allowed. She hadn't intended to use it. Now she had no choice. Her lungs burned, her vision blurred. She input the sequence. As alarms echoed across the failing tunnels, families were funneled downward. Hundreds, thousands. She watched them go. She didn't follow. The core sealed, the system locked. Silence fell alone. Above, her bunkers burned, her tunnels collapsed. The invaders pressed forward, but Evelyn Shaw no longer resisted. She had done her part. She laid down beside her final console, closed her eyes, and waited. She dreamed of dust, of the day they fired her, of the silence that followed. But the silence broke. Hands lifted her body. Voices, not commands, not orders, but pleas. Evelyn, Commander, wake up. Survivors, her survivors. She opened her eyes, not in her tunnels, but within the sealed core. They had found her. Sheriff Grant, the last ranking officer she once reported to, now just another survivor, carried her down after the lockdown. He broke protocol. He disobeyed her. Because she had taught him survival wasn't about machines. It was about people. The core's system strained. Oxygen ran thin. But within that sphere of darkness, Evelyn's calculations resumed. She restructured ration cycles. She reprogrammed atmospheric processors. Her voice, hoarse, barely audible, issued commands. They followed. Not because of rank, because of trust. Outside, nothing remained. Her empire of steel and stone gone. Her war lost. But inside that final chamber, life persisted. Not because of her walls, because of her. Time lost meaning. Day and night dissolved inside the core. Air grew thin. Water recycled endlessly. People slept where they could. Children no longer cried. They watched Evelyn. She moved between systems, hands cracked, eyes hollow, but her mind remained. She calculated every breath, every calorie, every hour. Sheriff Grant tried to make her rest. She refused. She remembered why she built the network, not to save herself, to save them. And so she worked until her body failed and she collapsed. But her protocols endured. The survivors followed her instructions. Days turned to weeks, their rations failed, their oxygen scrubbers failed, their hope failed. But then, above, something shifted. Tremors. Not detonations. Excavation. Outside forces had arrived, not enemies. Rescue teams. The collapse was ending. They were digging. The survivors had one task left: to hold, to wait. When the first crack split the chamber's ceiling, no one cheered. They were too weak. Eyes squinted against floodlights that pierced the darkness for the first time in months. Emergency crews pulled survivors from the core like relics from the grave. They found Evelyn last. She was unconscious, her pulse faint, her body starved, but alive. She didn't awaken for 3 days. When she did, she asked only one question: how many? Sheriff Grant whispered the answer: over 9,000. She closed her eyes again and said nothing. There were no medals, no parades. Her name remained classified, but the story spread of the woman who built the desert beneath their feet, of the bunkers that became the last sanctuary, of the commander who refused to abandon the people who abandoned her. She returned to the surface once, stood in the dust where her network once sprawled, where her machines once hummed, where her empire once lived. She looked at the horizon, and then she turned away. Years passed. The survivors rebuilt. The network Evelyn once called home remained buried, collapsed and silent beneath the desert. They asked her to rebuild it, to lead them. She refused. Her work was finished. She lived quietly in a shelter no larger than a single bunker chamber. People came seeking wisdom. She offered silence. Some days, children gathered at her door, asking why she built it all. She gave them only one answer: because no one else would. But the stories spread, told and retold, not of a soldier, not of a commander, but of a woman who built, who waited, who endured, and who saved more lives than history would ever count. Her name was etched into no monument, but spoken by every mouth that survived. Evelyn Shaw's final days passed unnoticed. No headlines marked her passing. No ceremonies honored her sacrifice. But the survivors remembered. They kept the machines running. They maintained the protocols. They raised their children with her rules. Ration carefully, prepare constantly, trust the systems, but never more than the people beside you. Her legend outlived her body. In the heart of the desert, where the sun burned endlessly and the winds whispered through forgotten vents, her name was spoken as truth. She was the woman the world discarded, the mind they labeled unstable, the soldier they buried in reports, and the architect who saved them all. When the collapse came, the world died above. But life endured below, because Evelyn Shaw had built it. And when they asked her why she never stopped, even when she was alone, she answered the only way she knew how: someone had to.